for Hollywood. That's gooey, bally-hooly Hollywood, where any office boy or young mechanic can be a panic with just a good-looking pan.
And any shop girl can be a top girl if she pleases the tired businessman.
Hooray for Hollywood! You may be homely in your neighborhood.
Bum, 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 bum. To be an actor, see Mr. Factor, you make your kisser look good.
Go out and try your luck, you may be Donald Duck. Hooray for Hollywood!
Do you think, and I just, you must think about this,
Yeah.
do you think people make, whether it's acting or producing or directing, are you interested in making another movie? Do you think if the right thing came along, the right ideas were right?
Well, I don't think they come along. I think you bring them. And the answer to the question is I don't know.
Yeah.
I find myself more and more interested in what I call this little thing called life.
Yeah. But we went out to a deli once and I ordered a potato skins.
What?
Potato skins.
Potato what?
Yeah, this is what happened then too. I get potato skins.
Oh, that's right. I remember that. Potato skin.
Yes, that's right.
And you know, I really love them.
You did like it, that's right. Yeah. It was like I had to introduce potato skins and then we get back to your house and you called the net and you were like, listen, Ben Mankiewicz ordered something called, what do they call it? Potato skins.
Yeah.
Potato skins, yeah. Which was like on the menu of every Applebee's type restaurant from like 1982 to 1997. It was America's leading appetizer.
Are you sure?
I'm totally sure. I don't think you've been to a Bennigan's. I'm just gonna guess. That never happened.
You mean you don't think I've done it again?
No, I don't think you've been to an Applebee's. I don't see one video of
Applebee's?
Yes.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Hey, Benny! Hi, Ronnie! Come on, fellas, here he is! Hooray for Hollywood! That woolly white and woolly Hollywood!
I said, what I will say, I don't care, it's time to war and wars. Until the night and the east, it beats in our ear. Don't you know, little fool, and I remember use your mentality when it comes to reality.
Hooray for Hollywood! That's gooey, bally-hooly Hollywood, where any office boy or young mechanic can be a panic with just a good-looking pan.
And any shop girl can be a top girl if she pleases the tired businessman.
Hooray for Hollywood!
And when you think about her performance in All of Me, what comes to mind? Well, it's funny because I was saying backstage, I watched this movie a long time ago. I mean, I was only 4 years old when it was made. I was very young. So I'm not the person to speak on it necessarily. But I think of this and I think, oh yeah, this is Steve Martin's movie, right? And then I think, oh no. The scenes I'm thinking of and what's coming back to me is all about Lily. And what is so special about this movie is Steve Martin and Liz Tomlin, to me, are some of the most gifted physical comedians. Their physical comedy, the way those bodies move, what they are doing. And I say this backstage comedy is so hard, and sometimes culturally on the totem pole it doesn't get its due. But you watch a movie like this and see how easy it looks for both of them, and I don't know, I look at that and I'm like, wow, the level of technical skill, the joy that what they're channeling is truly transcendent. But to see the two of them together, two true clowns, I mean, it is just, is traditional clown work at its best. So I think about the bathroom scene in this movie and what she's doing and her voice, her control of that voice, that character, and it's just wonderful.
Hooray for Hollywood, that's gooey bally-hooly Hollywood, where any office boy or young mechanic can be a panic with just a good-looking pan.
And any shop girl can be a top girl if she pleases the tired businessman.
Hooray for Hollywood, you may be homely in your neighborhood.
Bum, 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 bum. To be an actor, say Mr. Factor, you make your kisser look good.
Go out and try your luck, you may be Donald Duck. Hooray for Hollywood.
Well, here comes the story that I'm officially telling you now, because Chris and I, when we made the film, we literally fell madly in love. And so when you see this film, you will see the real thing. And, but we didn't let anyone know. So a few of the people who worked on the show kind of sussed it out, but we were as subtle as we could be about it. And then, you know, I don't want to be a spoiler for anybody. Is there anyone here who hasn't seen it yet?
Oh, there's quite a few.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
That is pretty amazing, because most people see it about 1,000 times. This is not a movie you see once, just like a lot of people think 1,000 times. So anyway, we were madly in love, and life was wonderful. We were both single. It was a fantastic, amazing experience. We loved this movie. We loved everything about it. The crew, everyone were great friends. It was wonderful. And then one day I came into work, and one of the biggest scenes in the movie, which I won't give away for the people that don't know, very intense movie in which I had to ask him a lot of questions about his life, and basically point out he's wearing the wrong clothes, things like that. Anyway, just before that, Chris had an earlier call, and I came in about half an hour later, and they said, Chris needs to talk to you about something. I thought, that's really odd. We've had a long time to talk about things, so what could it be? And it was that he was about to have a baby, and that his ex-girlfriend hadn't told him, and she just announced it to the world. So I then had to put my big girl pants on, and when I watched that scene, I can literally see the tears coming halfway up my eyeballs, and I just kept saying, you can't cry, you can't cry, you can't cry, you're happy. Lisa's really, really happy right now. So anyway, the good part of the story is that Chris went on to have these two beautiful children, and we met one another on many occasions. We remained really, really close friends, literally till the day he died. And I have to believe that I will one day see him somewhere in town.
Hey, Benny! Hi, Ronnie! Come on, fellas, here he is! Hooray for Hollywood! That woolly white and woolly Hollywood!
They hire cowboys and they hang their shafts up and all their maps up and give them all that they lack. Now ain't it funny? They pay them money. Shows what you can do if your horse can act.
Hooray for Hollywood! They hire fellas whose physiques are good, and then they tell them they're the perfect shape men to act like ape men, and they convince them they should.
When is the last time before you have physically been in the same place?
1982. Well, we were talking before, there was a screening or a reunion, I think like 15, 20 years ago in New York. Kevin was there. Tim, were you there?
I wasn't there.
And I don't think anyone else was there.
I think you were the only one there. Whenever it was, maybe it was 4 years ago then. I want to kind of take us all back to the time of this film, and I want to know what were kind of your feelings about how things were going at the time. So Kevin, for you, you had already done Animal House, it was a few years after that. I think you might have been on the guiding light at that point. how were you feeling about your kind of young career at the point of this movie being filmed?
Yeah, you know, you mentioned the guy in light, and I'd forgotten that. That wasn't even a joke. Switch. You know, the guy in light I had done a year on it, and they came to me and said, will you extend your contract? Which was another, I think, 2 years, and it was a raise, and obviously that was a tough thing to deal with, because I was going from, I had no other possibilities, but I just had this feeling that this was not where I wanted to stay, as great as it was, and so I said no, I'm going to pass on staying on the Guiding Light, and like maybe a week afterwards, I'm panicking, I'm thinking, shit, I should have, taken the contract and the whole thing. I got an audition for that.
Wow. Steve, what about you? You had done Can't Stop the Music, but my understanding is that you weren't 100% sold on the idea of performing being your career. You had another option.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about going back to school.
Mike.
Oh,
you're Steve.
I was thinking about going back to school and doing something else, and I still think about it. But Kevin, was the character's name was Tim?
Yeah, Tim the Teenage Alcoholic.
Right. And I know I'm going off. We were sitting in a restaurant one time, and a lady came up and she called you Tim, and she was like, Tim, you gotta stop drinking. You gotta stop doing this. And it's just a part, And, these are things that we were all sitting there. And, I mean, I know I'm supposed to talk about it.
That's okay.
This is exciting to me because there's so many memories that come up about the real stuff. And some of it, you can't talk about, but the real stuff really was as interesting as the work.
It's really got me hooray, 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 hooray for Hollywood. Hollywood. Yeah!
I went to New York, never acted in high school. And
You left college and you went to New York because you started going to movies, right? For like the first time in your life, you started watching movies.
I realized that the people on the screen were touching me. And I said, I'd like to learn to be able to do that. How do you do it? And the 3 goals were go to New York, try and work for Kazan, and become a member of the Actors Studio. So I did all that, and then when they put me in the studio, Lee and Mr. Kazan sat me down.
Lee Strasberg.
Yeah, Lee Strasberg, sorry. And they said to me, we want you to be kind of a guinea pig for us. Oh, good. 20 years old, and I want to be 21 years old, and I'm going to be a guinea pig. I came because I said, here's what we want to do with you. We want you to do for the first 9 months in this actor studio, we want you to work as often as you can, but we want you to do scenes with no obligation to dialogue. So for 9 months I did scenes without a word of dialogue so that they could connect my heart to you guys. It started being built that way.
Well, what do you think it was? What do you think it was that Strasberg and Kazan saw in you? They didn't want you to talk. I mean, very polite, with no obligation to dialogue. I feel like it's a super polite way to say no lines, right? But they got you to buy in is one thing, because you were then committed. But what did they see in you?
What they saw in me was this. I was an actor. I did a 5-minute scene from Waiting for Godot. And at the end of the audition session, they welcomed me to the actor studio. And I just, waited, if you do his stuff, Samuel Beckett, Waiting for Godot is just back and forth, one of the lines, so on and so on. So they said to me, the reason we're going to do this with you is you have no bad habits. want you to act. We want you to learn how to behave. And I coined a phrase years later about what I felt acting was. It's just 2 words. Having the ability to be publicly private. And to this day, I don't rehearse. I'll rehearse dialogue and stuff like that, and where I'm supposed to sit and stand and move around and all of that stuff. But I don't like to rehearse because, number one, I don't want the other actor to anticipate what I'm going to do. And if you rehearse, it becomes acting. And I always start from another place. What in this character is in me that I can transfer to what it was? And they saw that, and a chance, because I was a numbskull. I didn't know what acting was or anything like that. But I knew the people that touched me. And to this day, I'll still look at a movie for a moment. I'll give you an example. Bobby Blake did a movie called Pork Chop Hill. Yeah. Gregory Peck was the star of it. Bobby Blake had one scene, and they were trapped here. Gregory Peck's unit was trapped here, and the other unit was way over toward Glendale. And they were being shelled, and they needed the shells to go from them and get the people in Glendale. So their communications were all screwed up. So he asked for a volunteer, a runner. And Bobby Blake runs up and he said, he was, this is 1956 or 7.
Yeah, the movie was 59.
So he's, 20-if. And he says, I'll do it, sir. So he runs with the message at 11:04, start shelling them so we can get out of this position we're in. And on his way back, he gets ripped to shreds by bullets. And he's laying dying as they drag him into the front of the colonel. And the colonel sees that he's got, 45 seconds maybe. And he said, he just comes and pats his head and thanks him. And the little guy looks up at him and he says, don't you need me to be your runner anymore, sir? That's what I mean about moments. I'd see that movie just for that moment. I'd see Montgomery Clift play taps and From Here to Eternity for that.
To be an actor, see Mr. Factor, you make your kisser look good.
Go out and try your luck, you may be Donald Duck. Hooray for Hollywood! Hooray for Hollywood!
Margaret, you have a message to read from a colleague.
I have a special message from New York. Martin Scorsese, who, of course, with Steven and several other, George Lucas, Stanley Kubrick, several other directors, in 1990 created the Film Foundation to do just this, what we're here doing tonight, looking at a beautifully restored classic film that has touched so many people, and looking at it together in a beautiful movie palace, and we're just so grateful to be here for TCM. We also basically do the same thing that the Film Foundation does in spirit. So Marty would have loved to be here, and he just wanted to share a little note with the audience. He said, I saw and experienced Giant for the first time when I sneaked into its New York premiere at the Roxy Theater. I was 13 years old, but that's another story. And you have to get Marty here to tell that story, because it's pretty wild. I became obsessed with the picture and have gone back to it so many times over the years, and every time it's yielded more, keeps inspiring me and has enriched me and pushed me. I love it. At a certain point, we all realized that the film needed a lot of restoration, and as the technology has advanced over the years, there was a lot more work that became possible to do. I'm deeply grateful for Daphne Dents and Bob Bailey, Warner Brothers, and the whole team at Warner Brothers. They've given us all a great and truly precious gift.
with this new restoration.
Thank you, Margaret, and thank you to Laurie. Stephen, what was your initial relationship with John? Did you sneak in, or did you pay like a grown-up?
No, my initial relationship with Giant was the first time I saw it on television. Not the best way to see.
That's how George Stevens envisioned it. To be seen on television with commercial breaks and cut down. That was his passion.
Well, and his passion was realized with me because it worked on a small screen too. But it is called Giant, and I screened it for myself many, many times. I would just get a 35mm print, and I would sit there in a screening room at Universal where we show all the rushes, and I would just run Giant. I ran Giant. Maybe I've seen Giant on the medium-sized screen about 20 times, but I have seen Giant overall at least 50 times, I'm sure.
George, what do you think it is about this movie that speaks to people, that speaks to 13-year-old boys, that speaks to fully grown film directors?
Well, I think if someone said, that this is an epic film with the most expensive picture that Warner Brothers had made at that time, and about twice as expensive as Jack Warner thought it was going to be, and it was the most successful box office picture of Warner's. But for an epic film, someone pointed out, it's really remembered more for the breadth of its humanity. There's so many characters and themes that resonate, and I think that's what's important about it. And also it speaks to themes, including the situation with the Hispanic people in Texas at that time, 1950s. And a strong woman at the center, which were not common. I think it makes it a very modern film for the day.
In my fantasy world, which you were heavily involved in, Stephen,
I think we should clarify that.
You and Margaret call each other and be like, what do you want to do next? Let's do Giant. Like, how does that process work?
Well, the process, we have a really great process. Margaret and Marty and our board, we all can put names into a hammer to basically discuss which films should be restored. There used to be a lot of urgency with restoration based on nitrate film that was easily flammable and would be, 50% of all the movies that were made have already been destroyed and cannot be found. So it was very, very important. Now, Giant didn't fall into that kind of category, but George Stevens did a very amazing thing with Giant. The entire first third of the film has these long, slow bleed-overs or dissolves from one scene to the next. And they used to do dissolves called optical dissolves. And so years ago, when Giant was first made in 1956, all they had was an optical printer. And when you put anything through an optical printer, the film loses a generation, which means where you see it dissolve, it's grainy. And then when the dissolve is over, it's clear again. And even when they struck the first Blu-ray I saw of Giant, there still was a big issue with all those dissolves. They were still, I thought, a little unacceptably grainy. So this restoration was, the 4K restoration was really to try to correct that and to try to make it blend with the rest of the film, which Warner Brothers, they did Bob, and they did a great job. And so I called George about a year ago, and I just said, I really like the Blu-ray, I think it's great, but would you mind if we took another pass at it? And George immediately said, do it.
Hooray for Hollywood, that's gooey ballyhooly Hollywood, where any office boy or young mechanic can be a panic with just a good-looking pan.
And any shop girl can be a top girl if she pleases the tired businessman.
Hooray for Hollywood, you may be homely in your neighborhood.
To be an actor, see Mr. Factor, you make your kisser look good.
This was your first feature film.
But give us a little background on where you come from and how you wanted to be an actress always, right?
I fell in love with words at an early age and was reading a lot of plays. And I guess I watched, I mean, I was one of those kids whose nose was on the television set. We found out later I was very nearsighted, but or I'd be in my bedroom trying to listen to like whatever the 9 o'clock show is. Oh my God, it's Paladin. What's he going to do next? And I could only hear it. I couldn't. So I was a big. In fact, my uncle, who was a teenager when I was little, worked at the local theater. And he popped the popcorn and all that stuff. So he would sneak me in, and I fell in love with movies pretty early on. But I kind of like projected myself into the movie to be part of it. So strong imagination.
And so you're working. Where were you when all this happened?
I had decided. I had a degree in theater, and my husband, who became no longer my husband pretty quickly after school, was the best actor in the theater department. So I was told by a professor to get my degree done and get out of school and get a job so my husband could be an actor.
Surprise, surprise.
Well, that went really well after I was crushed into tiny little pieces. So we moved to Texas, and that's where we got a divorce. And I was in Texas and doing, all these kids from drama programs in Houston, they were from North Texas State, and we opened a little tiny 100-seat theater right next to the Alley Theater in Houston, which is their big professional theater. So, and we did it, we would work regular jobs and we would do that. And then I got in a company during those years where LBJ had things for projects for schools to bring in readers and something. And I was part of a little 8-man group that went all around Texas doing little plays and things from kids from kindergarten to high school. And I did this, and then I thought, well, I've got to either go to graduate school or really go to New York or LA because, so I went to Dallas. I went to Dallas because Dallas had been getting a lot of film work for Movies of the Week and Dallas, and the big thing. So they were hiring lots of actors, and they were ahead of commercials and what we call tech films, like training someone at
industrials.
Industrials, that's exactly what they do. So I did that, and then I did the first industrial for the IBM people, which showed them a computer on the secretary's desk. And I got that job because I could type 60 words a minute. But, and that was a good payday. And so I signed up for an audition class being done by a local casting person. So after we worked on all these things together, and she told me, I did it because I didn't get a job in a Chuck Norris film. It came close, but I didn't get it. And so I used to tell people what I learned from that is it's really hard to commit suicide with big disposable lasers. But when I did this audition workshop with Sherry, she said, listen, you walk in that room before you open your mouth, you're either in the running or you're out of the running. You could look like someone's sister-in-law who they hate, and it wouldn't matter how good you auditioned for the project. That it comes down to that. And so I said, thank you, and she said, listen, I want you to audition for me. Now, I've got this Australian guy's coming in to do some kind of a Western with Robert Duvall, and he's from Australia. He doesn't know. I'm going to get everyone to read as many parts as I can from my group of people. So I went in, and there was Bruce Reiser to read the thing with. And I read it, and he said, I want you to come back tomorrow, and I want you to do this scene. He showed me a scene. And he gave me the full script. And I took it home, and I learned the scene, but I bit the script to make sure it was real. That's the one I ended up getting because I had my teeth marks all over it. I was later told by a director, the wonderful Bruce Spielberg, who also directed Crimes of the Heart, which I also did read pretty good. But he said, you walked in the room before you opened your mouth, you looked just like the woman I imagined who would be in this, who would be the character of the caretaker. And that's I didn't screw it up. I didn't talk as much as I'm talking right now. I was under the impression that I was a relatively shy and quiet child.
That's called acting.
Yeah, that's really called acting for me. So that's how I got the part. And, came down to one thing. First of all, no one at the studios wanted me. They had 5 other women, and they flew me to New York to audition. And the other women were people you would know. And Hallie Foote, most people who didn't know theater knows Hallie, but she was also in the 5 people. So I got on the plane and went back.
Just to explain, Hallie Foote would be the daughter.
The daughter of Horton Foote, the writer of Tender Mercies. And lots of other wonderful things, like the adaptation of To Kill a Mockingbird. So I was waiting, and then I get a call. I mean, everyone I knew in Dallas who was getting small parts in this movie were calling saying, hey, I got on the Robert Duvall film. Hey, have you heard anything? No, I haven't heard anything. And so Bruce said, we're coming in tomorrow, and I want you to come down to our office in Waxahachie. I want the DP to take a look at you. So I came down, and I went into this room that they had set up as a kind of an office. He put me in front of a window, pulled the thing back, and this wonderful DP, Russell Boyd, came in, and they're like looking at me, and Bruce goes, what do you think? Do you think she's unfilmable? And they said, okay, so we're coming into Dallas tomorrow night, we're picking you up and taking you to dinner. So Russell Boyd and Bruce Beresford and Janine Oppenwald, who was the set decorator and was the set designer and has been nominated several times for set design. We were all there, and he said, okay, well, I guess we don't have any other choice. You better show up at 6 a.m. on Monday, because that's when we start shooting. And here's your script back, since you put your teeth in it. That's how I got hurt.
But interesting. And so Robert Duvall, this picture is sort of tailored for him, because he had a relationship with Horton Foote.
Yes, and he asked Horton to write this kind of movie for him. He has a thing, well, those days he had a thing for country music. Now he has, I think he had a thing for tango for a while.
Yeah, he made a tango film.
But he's a chameleon. And this is a man who's been hurt, he's just phenomenal in his boy. He did win the Oscar.
He did win the Oscar.
And probably some others that he should have had it for. But people my age who went to college and looked at film and studied acting consider him to be the primo actor. He's slightly older than we are, but we consider him the best American actor out there.
Evidence will be on screen
momentarily. Yes.
Did you think, because Bruce Beresford was from Australia, did you have any opinion about his approach to this material? Because this is where you're from. This movie is really...
Well, the plains in West Texas, which is where, not West Texas, it's Central Texas. It's Waxahachie, it's below Dallas, it's waving fields, and it's a lonely place. And you can shoot films in Australia that look just like that. And the Aussies and the Texans were like twins separated at birth. Football, bars, You know, they were. And so they had, the crew got them a tool leather buckle that had their initials on it. And they would call him Russell Bob and Bruce Bob because that makes their name a little more Texas. So they were like twin separate. It looks so right. If you go look at some of those wonderful Australian films, it's not a stretch. And Russell Boyd was one of those great Australian DPs who bent the light. There was never huge amounts of lights around. He bent it, and it had a real feel that lots of other cinematographers adapted after. It was his first American film, but he did Gallipoli, and he was one of those great. I mean, these Australians were just popping up all over the place. You know, Peter Weir, and they were just. Where did they come from? Because they had a school of film that was just, you know, breaking out, and all these guys had been in England in the 60s and came home.
The thing about this movie that so impresses me, watching it again today, is that they actually made movies like this for movie houses back then. I don't know that this movie would get a theatrical release today.
No, but you saw those small films get attention at the awards, which gives them an audience. I would say Tender Mercies opened in America in 3 theaters. One here, one in New York, and one in Chicago. More people saw it on airplanes than saw it in the movie theater. Do you remember, some of you here will remember the Z Channel?
Yeah, here in LA.
In LA. The Z Channel that year somehow got permission to air all the films that were in consideration.
Yes,
that had been nominated. And people had been wanting to give Duvall an Oscar for a very long time. Hortonfoot is a well-loved writer in town, a wonderful human being. They never quite figured out what they thought about Bruce, but he still went on to make a couple of other pretty good films. And more than that, even going back to Australia. But so it was just the timing and everything. It was the 80s. I can't really remember much about it other than curly hair.
It's the 60s you're not supposed to remember.
Oh no, the 60s. I remember the 60s. I was in high school in the 60s. I really remember the 60s. But the 80s, I remember the 70s very well. The 80s, like. There was a president who thought ketchup was food.
That was Nixon, but...
no, it wasn't Nixon.
Wasn't it Nixon?
No, it was
he was cottage cheese. Nixon liked ketchup on his cottage.
This guy was once the head of film actors.
Yeah. Yep. Let me ask you though, because we have to wind this up and let these people see this.
You didn't see a movie?
So,
I might say it.
But the other reason I find, watching this movie again, the other reason I find it a film sort of out of time is because it's such an incredibly compassionate movie. And I think that, you know, it's hard for me today to sometimes deal with social media and all this stuff because people are really short and mean and unforgiving today. And this movie is all about forgiveness. That is the point of this film. And you said something beautiful about your character in this movie, but I don't need you to repeat it, but if you could just...
One thing, I don't really write in my scripts, you know, a lot of actors and people do, but I wrote one thing in my script, and I wrote, and Mary watched and kept these things in her heart. That's a biblical verse. She's watching Christ, Jesus become the prophet, and I thought that's what Rosalie does. She watches and kept those things in her heart, but she is the one. She doesn't actively set out to rescue this guy. He has to rescue himself. But other than saying you can't drink around here, that's the only thing she told him that he must do, and the rest he did on his own. And with the death of his daughter in the car crash,
Stop this part right now. That's a spoiler. That's a spoiler. Stop. Don't go there. Did you see?
Ellen Barkin is also in this, and most of you remember her for lots of wonderful work that she did. So Yes, I think it was a film where everybody's seeking salvation.
You and Ellen were sort of both introduced in this movie.
Yes, well, she had done Diner, but it hadn't come out yet.
Yeah.
So she said she had this other little film she'd done.
Well, you are absolutely fantastic in this film. It is, for a first film, it's like a master class in film acting.
It was.
You're absolutely fantastic. And I thank you for joining us. And I also, we were laughing because I said, do people recognize you for anything in particular? And what do they recognize you for?
Mrs.
Pinkman.
Mrs. Pinkman.
Mrs. Pinkman from Breaking Bad. She's Jesse Pinkman's mom from Breaking Bad. It is fantastic.
It was, now there is, I mean, that's one of the best crews, one of the best scripts, one of the best acted. I mean, those people worked magic out there and did it again for Better Call Saul.
Well, Tess, I'm so happy that you were able to join us tonight and tee this one up for the audience. This is, and I'm glad that you all made the decision to come here. Who needs to see E.T. again? I mean, this is the movie tonight.
Hooray for Hollywood! That's only one and only Hollywood.
They hire cowboys and they hang their shafts up and all their maps up and give them all that they lack. Now ain't it funny? They pay them money. Shows what you can do if your horse can act.
Hooray for Hollywood! They hire fellas whose physiques are good, and then they tell them they're the perfect shape men to act like ape men, and they convince them they should.
Has anybody seen my gal? You're the gal. This is Rock Hudson and a Douglas Sirk film. So it's quite good. I mean, and it achieves what it intends to because Douglas Sirk knew what he was doing. Did you did a couple of films with him? Did you have a sense then that this was a guy who had a vision?
Douglas Sirk?
Yeah.
No.
No.
So I was
better
very
than that's the answer.
self-involved, and I hated my part, and I hated the lines that I had to say that I thought were stupid. and I didn't hide them well on the set. And he rode me on that. He liked to make me angry for some reason. We did not get along well. So that's the truth.
So
it didn't hurt the movie, I don't think.
No, it doesn't hurt the movie. Look, I don't know, I think, and I don't know whether, there's some other good actors in this movie, and the woman, I'm not sure, Lynn Barry, I make sure I had it right, who plays your mom, who worked for a long time, and she's so nasty in the movie. She represents sort of everything that we hate, but she's very good at it. Nonetheless, just about everybody in the movie, Larry Gates is in it, who 15 years later takes the most famous slap in the history of movies from Sidney Poitier in The Heat of the Night, plays your dad. Rock Hudson at this beginning of his relationship with Sirk. It's good actors, but they all seem to me to be in a slightly different movie than the one you're in, and that is to their detriment and your achievement in my mind, because they seem to be, talking like this, like they're in a play, and then there's this 20-year-old who is just different, that feels like an authentic human being.
Really? I have to see the movie again. I was not happy making it.
No, I know. I knew that history going in.
Yeah.
And so that's really why I wanted to talk to you about all this, because you're 20 years old.
Has the audience seen it yet?
I bet most people have not. I bet many have not. How many people have seen the movie? Raise your hand if you have seen it. No, and now raise your hand if you haven't seen it. And now raise your hand again if you have seen it. Quickly. No, sorry.
I'm not a critic of this movie.
Well, bring it on.
I cannot be. So I'm only going from my personal experience, which was very narrow.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people love this movie.
Yeah, no, look, it's engaging, and Douglas Sirk is as Larry King used to say, is a professional, right? And and it's early Rock Hudson, and Charles Coburn is, everybody likes Charles Coburn. I know you got something to say about Charles Coburn too. What interests me is you were getting $2,000 a week from Universal, right?
Me?
Yeah, that's where.
No.
No?
The first year I was there, when I first signed the contract, I was taking home $40 out of a $100 contract, but because I was underage, I could only take $40.
I guess I mean 2,000 at the week at the end.
At the end.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
yes.
but the groundwork for you saying in 1955, 5 years after you signed, the groundwork of you saying, I don't want any part of this,
yes.
was already laid. You already didn't like what you were doing.
Right.
But walking away at age 23 in 1955, making a lot of movies like this, although this is one of the better ones. I mean, that is bold. There are a few people in this room, including the person in this seat, who would do that. I would not do that. I would be seduced by the $2,000 a week. And you get up and you go to New York to study acting, and you're like, I hate these roles, I don't like this, this is not the life I want.
That's true, and that's what I did.
But yet you wanted to be an actor. I mean, that's what's amazing. It's not like you went to go to law school.
I went to not acting school, but I had good groups of actors I worked with and auditioned with material that I learned to get the contract. And then when they were impressed and thought I had a talent, and they immediately put in these silly roles. And I didn't know how to play them. I wanted to do works of the great writers.
Well, I mean, you're mistaken. You did know how to play them. You just didn't like it. Because as you're about to see, you definitely knew how to play them. You're like, totally fetching and delightful and charming. And I think, again, sort of at a different level than most of the other actors on screen. But what was that in you? Like, who walks away from a lucrative Hollywood career when what you want to do is act? And yet you're like, man, I'm going to give it up and I'm going to go to New York.
Money always represented something troubling. We never had it when we were young. My parents were very poor. There were a lot of arguments concerning money. It was a subject that was hateful to me. And I didn't want to live my life with it important. So my values were different from theirs. And the kind of work I was offered was important to me. And I'd worked in a very serious acting group before I was signed at the studio. And that's because I did a good job in my audition, that's why they hired me. So I really wanted to do good work.
I presume you talked to executives and said, I don't want to do these kinds of movies.
Well, that's what I wanted to be able to do, but I was so inarticulate. When it came to real life, I would not be able to get the words out in an office meeting with a studio head. I'd start and then my head would drop like this, and I'd have to run out in tears. It was the only time I was useful, I thought, was playing to somebody else. So there.
That's, I mean, it makes it, I gotta say, I just, every second of this conversation, you get a little bit cooler. I don't know, I imagine some people here who may not have known your history might have thought, well, you walked away from that kind of money and the stability of a studio job, you're a rising young actor in Hollywood because you came from money. But none of that is true. It's in fact quite the opposite.
Yeah, right.
Well, it makes that decision, I think, bold. You represent something that I think many of us wish we had, right? Which is this desire to not care about the material trappings of the world around us and pursue our dream, even if it means giving up those material wants. And most of us don't do it, can't do it.
I think it's harder to do that today because we know too many people through too many means to know how wealthy other people are and what their lives are like. I don't think there was that kind of communication when I was growing up.
Yeah, so maybe there was some naivete that
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
still, it's cool. So what happens when you get to New York?
Actually, I didn't go to New York right away, but I just turned down all the work that was offered me, which was a repeat of what I've been doing, until somebody offered me a really good television show, and the only reason that was offered to me, and I went to New York for that, and I got to the rehearsal hall the first day, and there, behind the table, was my friend from acting school, the good classes that I'd had, and he had recommended me to the director of the show, and said she could do this, and it was a terrific part, and I did it live, which was an incredible experience, and you wish you'd die before it happens. It's the chance that you take in live television, nothing can save you. You've got to do something when cameras are, and everyone across the country is seeing it live. In those days, they all saw the live dramas.
So that sounds like what you're describing is a sort of tangibly different experience than even the stage. Like it's even. It
was like 12 opening nights all together, that kind of energy. And so I did the show, and apparently I did it well. And the next day I went up to meet my agents, who I'd never met. I was too busy rehearsing the show. And the head of the agency said, "Oh, I just had lunch with," I was going to say, your granduncle, but
no, they didn't say,
I
certainly
just
didn't
had
say
lunch
that.
with Joe Mankiewicz, who said he just saw the best performance by a young girl on television he'd ever seen.
Oh, all right.
And
I know this.
Marty Churro said, who was the head of the office, said, "Well, that's our client, Piper Laurie." And I didn't believe him. And so he took me into his office, and he got your uncle on the telephone, who had to repeat it to me, and I just wept. I just broke down completely. I couldn't believe it. Never in my life had anyone of quality ever said, you can do something, you're good. So that was so very, very meaningful to me.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. That's nice. I like to hear good stories about Joe. So thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. God, we have so little time. Then, were you, as you worked in television in New York and the stage too, right? Or was it just television there in the back half of the 50s? Were you on the stage? Did you do Broadway also, or just television?
I auditioned for plays, and I had bad experiences.
Are you good at auditioning? You're not.
Terrible.
It's very hard auditioning.
Yeah, yes.
So, how did we get to The Hustler? Like, who started that process? And were you apprehensive about making a feature film and sort of reassociating with Hollywood?
I've been asked to do 2 one-act plays that Molly Kazan wrote. She was the wife of Elia Kazan. And we put them on at the Actors Studio. I was not a member, but that's where they decided to do it. And apparently Robert Watson went to one of those performances. We also did one of the plays, no, both of them, yes, off-Broadway at the theater for several months. And I think he went to those as well. And came backstage one day, and he said, "I have a script I'd like you to read." And I took it home, and I procrastinated because my mother had arrived to check up on me. And I hadn't seen her for a year or so. She's come from California. And so it took about 3 weeks before I actually got around to reading the script.
What's wrong with you? So you finally get around to reading it, sure.
I just couldn't believe how wonderful it was.
Right, so right away you thought, man, this is the kind of thing 10 years ago, this is what I was looking for.
Yes. And I still don't really know why he cast me in it.
Really?
No.
Well, let's think. I mean, it's weird. They all know why. Yeah. I mean, do you not see why you're great? I mean, do you not get that?
Well, I tried very hard to be good. I worked very hard.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I mean, Robert Rawson never claimed to be a good director to actors. He felt he was very weak. And he didn't know how to speak to actors.
That may be. I bet. Do you think? Do you agree with him that he didn't know how to speak to actors?
You know, you don't have to be able to speak the right words to an actor to make them understand what's right and what you'd like from them. There are lots of ways of communicating.
I mean, he directed some movies with some pretty fine performances, so I would argue that your point is correct. Maybe he didn't know how to say the right words, but I mean, he saw you, he knew what he wanted, he saw what you, I guess, don't see. But when you watch now, do you see it now? Do you see, if you watch The Hustler, if you watch, by the way, like one of the first made-for-TV movies that I ever remember seeing and loving, The Bunker, 1981.
Yeah, I love that.
With Anthony Hopkins as Adolf Hitler. That was, he played, I think, Goebbels' wife in that. That was something.
Yeah.
That was a power. So TV movies then were good. You know, there were a lot of real, I mean, these people know that. There's some really quality stuff. Anyway, we got to go, but I want to ask you, I know they would listen to you forever, but, and you've been so great this whole weekend to us, but Charles Coburn is the big name at the time in this, with this rising star, Rock Hudson also. What was Charles Coburn like?
Well, actually, he used to live down the street on Fountain, but I was never there. But he loved young ladies, and he got away with it. He'd go on pinching everybody. Nobody ever said a word in those days.
Yeah, well, wonderful actor. The more you learn about Charles Coburn personally, the less you like him. Yeah.
He gave me a criticism on Louisa, the first movie, my first movie.
That was with Ronald Reagan.
What?
That was with Ronald Reagan.
Right.
Whatever happened to that guy? Yeah, they dropped out of the business. Nobody ever heard from him. Yeah.
And Charles Coburn was playing Spring Byington's boyfriend, my grandmother's boyfriend. Anyway, I had a scene where I had to call up to my mother, and Coburn said, "Piper, you must not say." How did he gave me a pronunciation to use that I was not speaking properly. So.
Was he correct?
Probably.
Yeah.
Oh no, I know. I was saying, mother. No, you must say, mother.
Yeah. No. I side with Piper. Look, if most of you haven't seen this, this is a totally engaging film with, I actually think, a moderately surprising ending, which didn't give me quite exactly what I expected. So I think that's something to look forward to. You're wonderful in it. You're wonderful for being here. I cannot thank you enough. It's been a pleasure to get to know you even just a little bit.
To be here in the audience is terrific.
Yeah, well,
Hooray for Hollywood! That's gooey bally-hooly Hollywood, where any office boy or young mechanic can be a panic with just a good-looking pan.
And any shop girl can be a top girl if she pleases the tired businessman.
Hooray for Hollywood! You may be homely in your neighborhood.
To be an actor, see Mr. Factor, you make your kisser look good.
Go out and try your luck, you may be Donald Duck. Hooray for Hollywood! Hooray for Hollywood! Hey, Benny! Hooray for Hollywood! Hooray for Hollywood!
True. Boy, you've done your research. When I was an out-of-work actor, having just arrived in New York, I drove a taxi twice.
I didn't realize twice.
Only twice, because I discovered in the course of those two all-night taxi driving episodes that tall people are not intended to drive cabs. So they give all the leg room to the passengers, and you have to do this sort of frog thing like this for 7 straight hours, and I could barely walk at the end. So Only twice. On the other hand, I can always tell people that I drove a cab.
No, it's totally, it gives you street cred.
Yes, exactly.
So, how long were you an out-of-work actor in New York? Did you start getting work pretty quickly?
No, curiously, I was in New York for about 2 years before I had a New York job. I grew up in a theater family, and my first equity theater jobs were working for my dad. And he ran the Carter Theater when I came back from drama school in England, and he hired me for a year. And I acted and directed and designed, and I worked my head off. But I decided I've got to go to New York. I've got to do this without the benefit of nepotism. He wished me well, and I was out of work for 2 years. Although suddenly I started getting a lot of work as a theater director.
Really? Oh, so you had some success directing? So
I did.
Did you have to take other work? Were you a waiter? Were you, other than the 2 glorious nights tooling around Manhattan?
I worked part-time at the very left-wing Pacifica radio station.
Oh, nice.
WEAI in New York, doing sort of gonzo radio satire, sort of like the Goon Show.
Yeah, that probably paid very well. Yeah.
$75 a week.
Yeah,
$5 a week.
Yeah, you can. I hope you'll be able to recall from this question the quote I'm looking for. What is the darkest secret of an unemployed actor?
The darkest secret?
Yeah. It involves where you went to school.
Oh, yes, I went to Harvard. That's something you do keep to yourself, especially when you're auditioning for soap operas. It's never a good idea to let people know that you went to Harvard. They treat you with far, far too much deference. So I literally did keep it a secret. And I still don't boast about it.
I went to Tufts University, which is
that's the good school in Boston.
It's 2 subway stops from Harvard, but those are a significant couple of subway stops, it turns out, in one's life. But I just normally say to people I went to college in Boston and hope they think, oh, probably went to Harvard. Yeah. They could have gone to Harvard, he wears glasses. You mentioned growing up in this theater family. So from the time you were like 6 or 7 years old, you're acting. Your acting school was your dad, really.
Yeah. My dad created and ran Shakespeare festivals in Ohio. One of them, the Great Lakes Theater Festival in Cleveland, still going on today. And he started that in 1962, and I worked there 2 summers.
So hold on. So I didn't realize that this all happened in Ohio. I imagined him sort of traveling all over the country during the Shakespeare Festival.
Well, there were 4 different places in Ohio.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, Shakespeare festivals in Ohio don't often last. That we all discovered that. But I was in from the time I was a 2-year-old playing one of Torvald's sons. Nora's sons in A Doll's House. When at 2 years old, I have no memory of it whatsoever, but I'm told I was very good. You have to say that was my theater debut. But by the time I was 20 years old, I'd been in about 20 different Shakespeare plays. Starting out as a fairy in Midsummer Night's Dream, a spear carrier, and finally playing little bit parts.
It's that spear carrier. I remember talking to I became friends. We did a podcast first season with Peter Bogdanovich, and he started as an actor, and he was always a spear carrier. That's
literally a spear carrier.
Yeah. So correct me where I'm wrong. I'm sure you will. But when you get to Harvard, you don't really. Your first thought is not, I'm going to go to Harvard. I'm going to be an actor. What did you had a different intent?
If I had any particular ambition, it was to be an artist of all things. An equally inappropriate reason to go to Harvard. Mainly, I went to Harvard because I got in.
Sure.
Somehow can't say no when you get in.
This is weird. I did not. Go on. Yeah.
But I had grown up always doing art, taking art very seriously. I went to the Art Students League on Saturday morning.
And when we say art, are you you sculpting, painting?
Painting, drawing, printmaking.
You draw to this day, you're very good.
Yes,
very good.
By now it's pretty much as a hobbyist. Yeah. But I was very serious about it. But once I got to Harvard, literally within the first 2 weeks, I had auditioned for one of the big shows in their big theater, the Loeb Drama Center, and I got the part of Anthony Anderson, the Reverend in Devil's Disciple, one of the 2 leading roles.
Yeah, right.
And in an instant, I became like the campus star. And that first year, I played Gloucester in King Lear. I played Tartuffe. I was in Gilbert and Sullivan, getting ovations. And I've always said, if you hear enough laughter and applause at a young enough age, you're going to be an actor.
Right, that's it. Right.
Whether you want to or not.
Yeah. Were you discouraged in New York then after being the campus star and getting those cheers and that laughter and those accolades? Was that, how did you handle what I auditioned for a lot of shows when I came out to LA. The rejection can be crushing.
Well, yes, but you just, I don't know, you just keep soldiering away at it. And in New York in the early 70s, it was a tough city. I had great friends among all the other unemployed actors who just sort of clubbed together. As I say, I did have directing work. I had the radio work. I managed to be creative somehow or other. And I finally got a gig being in the resident company at Long Wharf Theater, very good New Haven regional repertory company. And the second show I did there was the American premiere of a David Story play called The Changing Room, about a rugby team in England all taking place in their locker room.
Oh yeah, this is good.
And it got national attention because it was a major play back in those days. It came to Broadway intact with our entire cast of 22. It opened on March 7th of 1973. And on March 25th, I won a Tony Award for it. I mean,
most people think of March 25th, 1973 as my 6th birthday, but it's also the day that you won a Tony Award, I guess. Well, we all have accomplishments. Was not that the show where you had Earth's literally what sounds like the most embarrassing mishap, perhaps, in the history of actors?
I can't believe you're asking me that.
Well, I wasn't going to, but you brought up the rugby play.
Yeah.
I got no choice now. I didn't even write it down.
Okay. It was this super realistic look inside a men's locker room of a professional rugby team.
America's been crying out for that story for years.
It was a cast of 22, 15 of us were players. So at some point, these 15 men had all their clothes off and changing into rugby uniforms. Total nudity, it was the talk of the town. And I had the scene that won me a Tony Award. It was the middle of 3 acts. I was brought in off the field, terribly injured, and covered in mud, a rainy day, this grim North Country afternoon. And I was taken off stage, and we literally had an off-stage bathtub just to lend even more super realism to the whole event. And I was completely scrubbed, all the mud was scrubbed off me. I got under the water and I got myself completely clean and glistening with water, and I was helped back into the changing room, stark naked, absolutely bare-ass naked, helped by the team manager, who sits me down, towels me off in this long, kind of haunting scene. I'm completely out of it, with blood dripping down out of my nose.
You're barely controlling your body, right?
I'm just inert, completely inert. And he treats me like a baby, dresses me like a baby, lurches me up onto my feet and pulls up my underpants. Just pulls them right up, sits me back down, and gets me dressed. Well, on this occasion, which you were so graciously brought up,
my pleasure, sure.
He lurched me up onto my feet and yanked up my briefs. And there's no other way to say it. My dick was sticking out. And I was like, thinking, how do I handle this? And I just sort of went, back in and sat back down.
Well, he got you to tell me.
Nobody will know.
I want to go back to what town in Ohio did you grow up?
My main hometown was Yellow Springs, Ohio.
Where is it? Near which?
Dayton.
Near Dayton. All right.
Yeah.
So you don't sound like a guy from outside Dayton. Like, where did this implacable accent come
Well,
from?
it comes from my family. My father was this very plummy actor-manager whose specialty was Shakespeare. And I think I just grew up a kind of freak in the Ohio cornfields. Also, it was it was where Antioch College is. It's a little oasis of left-wing liberalism in Ohio. Still is. It's like a fly in amber. I don't know how many of you were acquainted with Yellow Springs, Ohio, but it's a fabulous little town. Dave Chappelle, actually, like me, his father was a teacher at
Antioch,
and he still lives there.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's a little figure. He has exactly the same accent as I do.
It sounds like you were born exactly in between New York and London, like in the middle of the Atlantic.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, I went off to London after Harvard to study at Lambda, and I came back with this just horrible hybrid accent somewhere between Yellow Springs, Ohio and London. And I honestly had no idea that I had acquired it. And my sister just couldn't stand this. She said, I'm not going to even talk to you unless you drop that pretentious English accent. And I said, what accent? But bit by bit I managed to purge it.
But the result, whatever you've ended up with, is this unmistakable voice. Like you, as soon as, even if people don't see you, they know, oh, well, that's, Lithgow is in this. That's right. Your voice has served you very well.
The voice of Progresso soup.
That's right. I love Progresso soup, right? I probably would never have tried it. Let's get to the movies. I would like to, am I correct that the title of your first film is has got 1, 2, 3, 4. It's at 5 hyphens in it, which is not a good title.
Maybe that's what was wrong with it.
Called Dealing, or the Berkeley to Boston 40 Brick Lost Bag Blues.
That's right.
With 5 hyphens.
Yeah.
Can't believe that didn't work.
Yeah. Well, it was directed by a young graduate of Harvard. And he cast me because he remembered me as a theater wonk at Harvard. And it was about dope dealing at Harvard, of all things. It was a big Warner Brothers movie in the wake of Easy Rider, when all the studios wanted to make another hit with Easy Rider, stoner dope dealing movie. It's funny, it did terribly. Nobody's ever heard of it. It's very rare that I hear that title. Mainly because nobody can remember.
Right now, that was worth trying to remember.
But at the Governor's Awards dinner just 3 weeks ago, I don't remember his name, but he was like the archivist at the Academy's new museum.
Yeah.
He came up to me and he said, I have just seen Dealing, or the whatever. He said, and that is a fantastic movie. I'm gonna make sure that we get. I thought I was dreaming. But Barbara Hershey was also.
That's right, Barbara Hershey. That's right. So, but early, so you had a string, and I don't know which numbers they were, but in the starting in 1976 and running through 1984, you were in so many significant movies. Right? Movies that really mattered. Starting with Brian De Palma's Obsession with Robinson in 1976, where it was like our first taste of the villainous John Lithgow. I take it probably not your first time playing a villain, but
well, I had done a lot of evil characters in Shakespeare. Very small characters, of course, as I said. It was all bit parts, but I played Catesby and Bloody Clifford. You know, if you're in a Shakespeare company, you play clowns and villains, heroes, clowns, and scoundrels.
Yeah, my stock and trade is playing scoundrels and fools.
Exactly.
That's a lovely quote. So a couple of De Palma movies, Obsession and Blowout, where your evility, which is not a word but should be, is quite memorable. What was, is there an ease with playing villains?
Well, you know, it's interesting. There's actually a third still, Raising Cain. I did a trilogy of Brian films. And Brian, if you look at all of his films, he loves to bury the identity of the villain. And he loves to have very nice guys be his villain. It's a sort of perversity of his. Expose the nice guy. And I did it over and over again for Brian. And it is my friend Bonnie Turner, one of the creators of Third Rock from the Sun.
One of the creators of the Coneheads too, right?
Yeah, and with her husband Terry. She informed me what my particular magic was. She said, your face can go anywhere. It's a very bland face. But you never know what's going to happen. And that's why you're a very, very surprising comic and a very shocking villain. You just never know which ways it's going to tilt. And when I get hired to do something like Dexter, where I play this completely bland, as a matter of fact, TV Guide wrote a review of me in Dexter, which was a very complimentary review, but it referred to me as a bland blob of a man.
That's nice to read.
And I have to say, I chose to take that as a compliment.
Yeah.
A bland blob of a man.
Yeah, there's a little scene in All That Jazz, right? The restaurant scene, right? And it's just this moment that you have that you don't know. It's really the whole scene of where there's just this little wisp of contempt while being very nice. Like you're doing people favors, but it's clear how you really feel about these things.
Oh, I'm delighted you pointed out that scene. That was my chance to work with Bob Fosse. And, you know, that character, it was the director that they went to after Roy Scheider had his heart attack.
Right.
And therefore, he basically represented all the directors that they went to after Bob Fosse had a heart attack.
Right.
And had to pull out of Chicago. So, in the course of directing the scenes, he mentioned Michael Bennett, Howard Champion, Mike Nichols, Hal Prince. If you remember, my character wore his glasses up over his head. That's pure Hal Prince. And yeah, the little moment when I scribble an autograph on a napkin for a young girl who says, next to Lucas Sargent, you're my favorite director.
Yeah, that's right. It's,
and the line was, good luck on your career.
Yeah. But there's also this little moment where she comes up and she says, are you Lucas Sargent? Can I get your autograph? And you go, well, of course. And there's a little glance that you give to the others, like, see what's happening? Yeah, do you guys see what's going on here?
You're spotting everything.
Well, anyway, it's just this again lovely moment, and and then these really interesting characters, Roberto Muldoon and World According to Garp. Tell people who might not know what that character was.
Oh, that was a wonderful experience. Garp, I had read the novel of Garp a couple of years before, like everybody else who read any books. And I was crazy about it. I loved the character of Roberto Muldoon. But I never dreamed, it never occurred to me that I would either be in a movie of this, play this role, or even that a movie could possibly be made of that book. And then it all came up like 2 years later. I remember my agent's assistant telling me that George Roy Hill wanted to see me for World According to Karger. I thought, well, how fantastic, but for what role? I certainly don't, I'm no Garb, I can't even remember. And I said, what part is it for? And the assistant said, well, I don't know, there must be a typo here. It's for the character of Roberta. And I thought, oh my God. It was like perfect. I mean, it was, I thought, yeah, I'm the perfect person to play this because I could conceivably be a tight end, a professional football.
Right, the character is a former football player.
Yeah, and from the Philadelphia Eagles. But I have the sensibility of a 12-year-old girl. It's like, perfect. And I went in to meet with George Hill, and Robin Williams was already set for the film, and he did not consider me for the role at all.
George Roy Hill didn't?
He did not, because he thought I was too tall. But ignoring the fact that the tight ends are like the tallest people in the football field. But he said no, he turned me down, and like 8 months went by where he saw like 100 actors. He saw women, he saw actual transsexuals, he saw, they offered the part to Kevin Kline. Really? But he accepted it. They did a makeup test, and they said, no, it's not going to work. You look too much like a pirate. And he finally gave up and gave me a screen test along with 3 other actors. And curiously, I had read a remarkable memoir by Jan Morris, who was the first transsexual anybody had ever heard of, about the whole, she was an English travel writer, and about the whole, a very intimate history of what she went through. And George interviewed me during this screen test, and I just more or less regurgitated everything I'd read in this book in the person of Jan Morris, and it got me the role.
So the first time when he rejected you, you met with him, you just met with him, you didn't read, there was no audition.
No, I don't recall reading. And this was the whole, and there was another moment when he wanted to see whether I was a persuasive football player. So I was dressed completely in drag with a wig, and it had done me up completely. But he had me take a hike from stagehand and move back, shoot a football to a stagehand way at the back of the sound system. And I did that. And he caught it, sort of reached and caught it, and I went, oh. I think that's what got me. I'm curious,
as being Turner Classic Movies event, that George Roy Hill shunned publicity. He didn't like talking about his movies. He didn't like talking to the press. He didn't like, he was an introvert, right? He directed World According to Karger and Slapshot, and then Which Casting Sundance Kid and The Sting, and this really great director. How markedly different that is from what it must have been like working 3 years earlier for Bob Fosse.
Well,
and I don't. So, what is the common theme that makes them both so good at their job?
They were both completely work-oriented. They had blinders on. Fosse was a choreographer, and he had all the precision. If you know his choreography. Bob Fosse and Herbert Ross, whom I also worked with, they were both former choreographers, and so they worked with that kind of precision. George came out of 1950s live television, where you rehearsed for 4 weeks before you performed, and you performed live for the nation. We rehearsed Garb for 2 weeks with tape down on a big gymnasium floor for every single scene, and we literally did run-throughs the
As if you were going to do a play, like almost rehearsing.
Yeah. And with Mirek Onverchek, his cinematographer, the two of them would just watch us as we acted. And he figured out exactly how it was going to be shot. And then he considered his work like 60% done by the time the film began.
Yeah, almost like Hitchcock a little bit. The shooting is it's just the last.
And I remember the first day I worked was a scene where Garp and I was playing with Garp and his two boys, and they had tied me to a tree like a damsel in distress, and I was, sort of camping it up as a damsel in distress. And we shot all afternoon, and at the end of it, I said to George, I just, I was out of costume and everything. I said, how did it go today? I just felt, it was one thing to rehearse it, but somehow I felt, it just seemed so exciting. I was all right. And George said, well, I'm glad you brought that up. And my heart just sank right into my stomach. And he looked at my face, I just went ashen. And then he roared with laughter. He said, oh, it was fine. If there's ever anything wrong, I'll be sure to tell you. And honestly, that was the last piece of direction he ever gave. He just let his actors go.
Is there a type of, we did an interview at TCM about 2 months back, and I spent a wonderful day with him and then a long dinner with Brian Cox, such a wonderful actor on Succession, and had a great career prior to that.
Worked with him twice.
Right. So he, in his book, describes directors for the most part as pests.
That's Brian.
Do you? Well, you've worked with literally, we've named them, De Palma, Fosse, George Orwell, so wildly underrated. Herb Ross, really good director too, did Footloose with you. Is there what do you look for in a director? And do you get what Brian Cox is saying? Is there a type of director, particularly on episodic television, where you think they're maybe getting in the way?
I would say there are so many elements. Actually, I remember having this conversation with George Roy Hill. I said, there's so many areas in which a director has got to function. Some of them are great at camera, some of them are great at working with actors, some of them are great. And he said, no, directing is 3 things.
I already left George Roy.
The script, the casting, and the execution. That's it. Well, I absolutely love that attitude.
Right, sure.
Because you feel like you're in wonderful hands. Bottom line, you wait for preparation. And, someone who's experienced and knows just what he's doing and what he wants, and yet is wide open to the creativity of the people he's working with, or she. You just do your best to create the scene the way you see it, and deliver it to the director, and they slice it and dice it, and they take it from there. Even movie experiences that go way south. I've done a lot of lousy movies, but even those, you take from them some marvelous friend. It just always happens. I've just had the extraordinary experience of discovering a beautiful friendship with Jeff Bridges, whom you just spent a long, long time in preparing a show for CBS. They are my great friends. The sad thing about it is you have these wonderful friendships that sort of get put on hold for sometimes 10, 20 years until you see them again. Often it's working together again.
So you mentioned Dexter, this remarkable season. And the way people who love Dexter talk about that season of Dexter, I seldom heard people as excited about any piece of art, any movie ever. Winston Churchill, who played Churchill in The Crown, and people and now you're doing this thing that I think people will have the same reaction to. I've seen, because I met Jeff Bridges and did an interview with him. I've seen 4 episodes of this show called The Old Man. He's the old man, but you were also an old man in the show. And there are different actors who, it's set, there's a couple of guys who were about 70, and then what happened to them 30 years earlier. That's sort of the nature of the show. But what makes a guy like Jeff Bridges special as an actor?
Well, that's what you would expect. I mean, his presence on film is so much like his presence in the same room. I'm sure you had that experience.
That's right, yeah, I did.
And he's just so relaxed. We have something lovely in common. We both grew up second generation. And his father sounds like Lloyd Bridges, a wonderful actor who's best known for Sea Hunt, but you also saw him in High Noon and any number of other terrific films.
Airplane.
He had a wonderful sense of humor like Jeff. And, you know, both Jeff and I grew up seeing this kind of magical world where our dads were just having so much fun doing what they did. And he has never lost that sense of fun, and neither have I. I honestly think that if you don't enjoy acting full out, if it isn't a really exuberant experience for you, you just shouldn't be an actor. And I know actors who are just simply tortured by the whole process, and I wonder, why are you doing it?
Well, that moment when you're talking to George Roy Hill, that sounds, torture is probably too strong, but clearly this is a great deal of self-doubt.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, insecurity is our stock in trade, us actors. I don't think we would be actors if we weren't insecure.
Still now? I mean, like you have 17 Emmys. Like when does the?
It's never enough. It's never enough. You know, when you first arrive on a set, especially if there's somebody who is kind of you're slightly in awe of, and there's certainly plenty of those. You're just until you have. I am aware that people are glad that they're working with me, but it doesn't matter. It's like being showing up at the first day of school. There's a certain tentativeness, and you worry about what they think of what you're doing.
Do you think it's more true in performers? More true? I mean, I don't think of myself in that way, but I definitely have it. I mean, I constantly hear that fear of being exposed, for who you really are. But do you think it's more true in artists and actors than it is? I don't know. I sort of sense that it's probably true in just about everybody.
I think it's a truth of life that everybody is equally insecure, and we deal with it in vastly different ways.
Yeah.
I mean, a big bully like Donald Trump, I feel, is a very insecure man.
No.
And I am in the empathy business. I mean, playing parts is a matter of entering into the lives of others. And I always start from the most interesting thing to sort of to winkle out of a character is where the heart of his insecurity is, or his grief, or things that he's conflicted about. It's always a good place to start.
Yeah, there's I find this show, The Old Man, I think it's really special. I think others will feel the same way. And there is even though I haven't reached the point where you and Jeff Bridges have a scene together, it sort of moves back and forth between the two of you. Both of you have this this remarkable authenticity that I totally believe these characters existed, and yet I feel like, that's a John Lithgow part, right? That you both have become these people, right? Without losing entirely who you were. And I don't know how that balance works, but it works.
Well, we're all stuck with the same voice and the same body, playing different characters. Of course you want to be as different as possible from the last thing. And of course you want to constantly surprise people and show them something they haven't seen before. But there are a lot of actors whom you might admire enormously, but you probably were most impressed with them the very first time you saw them. Because inevitably you're going to see them doing some version of the same thing over and over again. I mean, even talking so much about Jeff because he's very present at this moment in my life and in yours. But he's so easy to be with. You know, when you talk about insecurity, you don't feel any insecurity with Jeff. He is just lovely to be with.
Yeah, I kept thinking, this guy is doing a spot on Jeff Bridges.
Yeah,
right. He's killing it.
This is the Big Lebowski.
Yeah, right. Well, it's true. They wrote that movie, The Big Lebowski, for him, and they were.
You can't imagine anybody else play that part.
When you were growing up, then did you watch movies?
Oh God, yes.
You did. Who were some of the actors who influenced you? Some classic actors who made a difference.
Well, when I was very little, I remember just idolizing Kirk Douglas and Burt Lancaster. When I became a little older and more pretentious, I was a big fan of Lawrence Olivier and Alec Guinness. Alec Guinness was always one of my great heroes. Pretty much the usual suspects. I loved, that you paid me the compliment that I was a character man.
A leading man character actor. I think I made that up.
Yes,
but I like that.
No, but I love to hear things like that. I take that as a real compliment because those are the actors that I always loved. I loved seeing acting going on. You know, it's like with Van Gogh, you loved seeing those big blobs of paint because you can imagine him applying them. It's kind of what's made me such a ham bone as an actor. I mean, I'm out there. You know, Third Rock from the Sun was so much fun because there was everything. I was just exploding all over the place.
So I'm interested in that too. I'm going to get to Third Rock in a second. Well, no, I'll do it now because you brought it up. So this is in the mid-90s. You're successful. You get, by the way, but we didn't talk about Terms of Endearment, which you just saw on a plane not that long ago, right? Or something, right? Mm-hmm. And so, first of all, a couple of things I love about you. Well, look, there's many things, but here's one of them. And I don't disbelieve actors when they say, "Do you ever watch yourself?" But the answer almost invariably is no. And I know some of them aren't being honest. And it may be because when they watch, they hate it, and they don't really want to share that, and I get that. But you got no problem watching yourself, right?
Well, sometimes I do. I don't like myself when I'm bad, and that.
Do you ever think you've been bad? Because
oh God, yes.
Tell me, give me a movie you were bad at, or
well, I won't tell you. For fear you might go see it. No, I absolutely love watching Third Rock from the Sun. I think pretty much what I was just saying. I just love the excess of it.
Right. Yeah.
And it's all in a kind of absolutely madcap, crazy reach for a laugh, moment to moment. It's just so insane.
But you did this. You had.
Oh, it makes me laugh really hard. I think I'm hilarious.
And you saw Terms of Endearment on a plane, and what happened?
Oh, I cried. You know, it was absurd because everybody could see me crying.
And you're you, so they're like, what happened to John Lithgow?
Yeah. It was a fabulous moment years ago, speaking of movies on planes, back when there was one big movie shown for everybody, where they were showing Footloose.
Like, on the plane, and you're on the plane.
Right on the plane.
That's weird.
And there was like a 4-year-old little boy in the chair, the seat right in front of me, next to his mother. And at a certain point, his mother leaned over to the little boy and said, and from that moment on, every time I appeared on the screen, there you go. Like he was trying to figure this out.
Right, sure.
That's great. Metaphor for the magic of movies.
So, that reminded me of the other thing I got to cover here. So, but I think, look, now, again, Dexter, The Crown, Perry Mason was so good, this reboot. Perry Mason, he was so wonderful in it.
Great Mankiewicz.
So tragic, yeah, Mankiewicz was so good. I don't know if people haven't seen it, it's on HBO Max. It's really it's dark. It is not like the original. And it's very good. And there's but in the mid-90s, you know, and now the old man, like, television has never been better. The best writing in this town is really probably on television. Yeah. But in the 1990s, people who made movies didn't do television. That was like career suicide. That was admitting that you were not a movie star. And you, I think, believed that a little, at least regarding sitcoms, because you were like, hey man, there's one thing I'll never do. You're never going to catch John Lithgow in a sitcom. And then,
such a snob. No, it's true. I was asked to play Frasier on Frasier. On Cheers.
Right.
And I turned it down out of hand. I don't even think, I literally can't even remember the conversation when my agent said they want you to do this.
And by the time Frasier showed up on, I'm a huge Cheers fan, by the time Frasier showed up on Cheers, Cheers was a big deal. Good, successful show.
But no, it was really, it was the one thing I was not going to do. I was not going to do episodic TV. But I hosted Saturday Night Live 3 times in the 80s.
Yes.
And the second and third of those 3 times, Bonnie and Terry Turner were on the writing staff. And when they cooked up Third Rock from the Sun, they wrote it with me in mind. Having seen me do gonzo review work on sketch work on Saturday Night Live. And they pitched it to me. My agent said, your friends Bonnie and Terry are in town and want to have breakfast with you. I thought, oh. And sat down, went and met them at the Four Seasons, and there was Bonnie and Terry and Carsey and Werner and Karen Manderbach, the whole Carsey Werner brass. And I thought, this is a pitch. I've been totally ambushed.
Just want eggs.
How am I going to be as gracious as I can and get the f*** out of it? And you know, the time naturally came when they had to pitch this to me, and the first words out of Terry Turner's mouth was, well, it's about these 4 aliens. Oh. And about 5 minutes later, I was sold.
Really?
I mean, it was such a wonderful premise. And to be honest, it hit me at exactly the right moment. I had just done this string of ghoulish villains. And I thought, my God, I'm turning into Basil Rathbone. You know, Cliffhanger and Ricochet. And
by the way, Cliffhanger and Ricochet, both good.
I know they were good, and but I was. It seemed so wonderfully different. I loved all these people that I was sitting and having breakfast with. They were just so delightful. And it was a moment when both my kids were in like 7th and 8th grade. And I thought, wow, if this is a success, and I would only want to do it if I thought it was going to be a success, I'm home for their entire school until they graduate from high school.
As opposed to leaving for 8 weeks, 10 weeks to make a movie in some other part of the world.
Yeah, and I had been doing a lot of that. I had been away a lot when my kids were little. And I thought, what the hell, let's have a flyer. This really looks like fun. And it took about 2 years before we finally pulled it together to actually get it on the air. During those 2 years, I would tell my friends, oh man, I'm doing this really cool thing. It's all this group of aliens. They're a research team. They're from another planet, but they're here to figure out how humans behave. They don't know a clue. It's so fun. And my friends would look at me like, I'm like, wow, there goes a career.
So when I looked up, Googled, in the course of researching you to find SNL skits from something, when you hosted it, there was this, first a bunch of them comes up. One that I learned that they shelved, shot in a rehearsal, didn't use, and then brought it back when you returned to host it, which is you're a priest taking confession from pets. Yeah, pet confession, which is really special. It's really, it's as you would imagine, it's fantastic.
I urge you all to find it.
Yes. The pet confessional is great. Just a couple of dogs come in and tell you they've been bad dogs. But then there's this other wonderful one called Skeleton.
Yeah, right.
And then I listened to where you play an anatomy professor with a skeleton next to you as you teach a class, right? And except every time you turn and you talk about very detailed, long explanations of the humors, I don't know what the hell anything is, and then you turn to the skeleton and you get scared every single time. You know, they go, ah! Right? You know, it's really this.
You're doing better than I do.
And then I listened to you on Conan O'Brien's podcast. And this thing, a person on Saturday Night Live hosting the show, the sketches, the great Phil Hartman is in the sketch, right? Just a boundless talent, right? And you, and clearly not, I don't suggest anything other than your life is filled with things, could not initially recall this, right? And I was like, wow, man, this guy has done a lot.
I was amazed myself.
And then, as Conan mentioned it, then you...
Not only that, but Conan reviewed it. It was the first thing he'd written that was put on the air.
Yeah.
And I had totally forgotten it. I raced home and I looked it up myself, and I didn't even remember. It came back to me when I finally saw it.
Yeah, it's something.
And sure enough, it was hilarious.
Yeah, and then Conan had written it years earlier, or months earlier, but they never had the right host.
Yeah.
And so then finally, they were like, oh, Lithgow. He can do this,
Yeah.
right? This is a Lithgow-y character, right? Yeah. He'll do this, and you did it, yeah.
It was great fun.
I ask this all the time. It seems such an obvious question, and I think I know the answer, especially having seen such excellent, really, I mean, I want to say inspiring, even though the characters themselves aren't inspiring, but you see a show like The Old Man, and you think, man, look at these guys, look at Bridges and Lithgow, and they've never been better, right? I mean, they were already good, and they've never been better. Do you think of, how much longer are you going to do this? Do you do it forever until you can't do it? Like, do you ever think about quitting? Do you ever think about, your wife just retired, she's a UCLA professor, you can put your feet up, hang out with the grandkids?
Then I retire about 4 or 5 times a year. I mean, some people call it unemployment. I call it it is the difference between actors and everybody else. People tend to have 2 or 3 jobs in the course of a lifetime, maybe more than that. But we have 4 and 5 jobs a year. And it all starts all over again. You go from one cohort to another. You have to embrace it's kind of a vertiginous life. You never know when it's all,
I don't know the word vertiginous. Again, I'm like tough.
Vertigo, you know.
That makes sense, right?
You know, you're afraid that it'll all end and your stock will
Even
fall.
now? Like, so we were up in the green room, somebody asked you, that, you know, you finished this show, The Old Man, and so you're not working right now. You don't have a gig, and you're, like, amazingly, with all these Emmys and Tonys and Academy Award nominations, Grammy nominations, you're anxious about that.
Well, we call it available.
Please check out The Old Man. It'll be on FX, I believe, in June. This has been a real honor for me, the great John Lithgow.